My hello and welcome to PhD Woman on It. Hack the future. My name is Beata Young, and I'm sorry for this small interruption. Today's positivity hack delivered will be by our guest, Breen Sullivan. Topic: How to get more women in the boardroom. Episode 93 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo. And empathy is critical when you are becoming a woman on the boardroom or have ambition to become one. Let me just remind you about some of the things that's been happening in technology world. Today marks an important start for many females across the globe, Women's History Month. The National Women's History Alliance designates a yearly theme for Women's History Month. In 2023, theme is celebrating women who tell our stories. This theme recognizes women past and present who have been active in all forms of media and storytelling, including print, radio, TV, stage, screen, blog, podcast, news, and social media. And hence, we are delighted to have a great role model, Breen Sullivan. Women's History Month and its origin dates back to 1981 when Congress passed and authorized, requested by the President Reagan, the proclamation beginning as a Women's History Week, as requested by Congress. President Reagan issued presidential proclamation. American women of every race, creed, and ethnic background helped found and build our nation. Not just American nation, but all the nations across the globe. As leaders in public affairs, American women not only worked to secure their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also were principal advocates in the abolitionist, temperance, mental health reform, industrial labor, and social reform movements, as well as the modern civil rights movement. I'm blessed to have lots of you females surrounding and supporting us, as well as men, because our work is so much easier when we have our male counterparts beside us. Congratulations to Esha Toffe, founder of Startup Kano, for winning the prestigious UNDP Innovation and Gender Equality Award in digital category. Kudos to Carol Ndosi for continuing to emphasize the importance of recognizing women's contribution to the growth of technology in Tanzania. Ebru by Bara Demir organized central kitchens for the earthquake victims in Turkey. They now have 4 main central kitchens. Well done, Ebru. Now let's go back to our topic, how to get more women in the boardroom. Boardroom gender imbalance is a problem that affects all industries. Despite gaining momentum in their careers and making great strides over the past years, women remain underrepresented in corporate leadership positions. According to the 50/50 Women on Boards 2022 annual report, which used data from Equilar, women only make 28% of board seats on the Russell 3000 index of publicly traded companies. There is a clear need for more women at the seat at the table. With the right strategies, we can help get more women in the boardroom and create an environment where everyone can thrive. Our guest is Breen Sullivan, a C-suite executive, the founder of the Fourth Floor, a market network on a mission to close the gender power, wealth, and funding gap by diversifying boardrooms and cap tables. The Fourth Floor matches startups and companies to board-ready women in a trusted, efficient, and cost-effective way to disrupt the traditional board search process and break systemic barriers that have kept women out of the board candidate pipeline. Breen, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. I know times are very busy during Women's History Month. Where are you calling us from today?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Beata, for inviting me to participate as a guest on this podcast. I'm so excited to be here. I am not in as beautiful a location as you apparently are. I can hear the waves crashing behind you, and it's absolutely glorious. I am in the New Jersey suburbs, which is a little less exciting. I am right outside of New York City, which is where the fourth floor is based.
That's great to hear from you from New Jersey, as a beautiful location as it is. Unfortunately, I have to use public common area because unfortunately Caribbean times for Flow, our provider, are flowing, as I could say, very slow. So unfortunately, since December we've been waiting for connectivity, but fret not, we are going to bring more women to the table, and we are going to discuss the topic of how and why. So let's go to why first. Why did you create Fourth Floor, Breen?
Well, thank you, Beata, for that question. This is probably my favorite topic. So my background, in fact, is as a general counsel for tech startups. And one day I noticed that male colleagues of mine at these companies where I was working, they often were sitting on advisory boards and startup boards, and they were getting promoted. And the thing is that by serving on these boards, they were also earning a spot in the board candidate pipeline because now they had for-profit board experience, and they were also tapping into board networks, which oftentimes can lead to angel or even venture investing opportunities, which then kind of further expands those networks. And the thing is, my female colleagues were not doing these things. And it wasn't because we didn't want to do them, but it was really because there was no place to go to access the opportunities or really to get started on the journey. And then the other thing that I noticed from my unique vantage point as a head of legal inside tech startups, it was that many companies from small to large are in fact under leveraging their boards. And that means they could have advisory boards, but they don't, even if that could be helpful to them given their industry. They have unfilled director seats year over year. And what that means for the rest of us is less board opportunities than in fact there need to be. And it also means that companies are missing out, frankly, on the value that boards could bring. So, those two insights really led me to see that there was an incredible opportunity that was really just being left on the table for companies, but also for individuals who really want to break into that board candidate pipeline and have access to the experiences that they need to have access to in order to really build a for-profit board career, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector.
So, were you already having some experience on the board, or were you just thriving to be there and you
Right.
thought, I'm going to come up with that and help my career?
Well, I think it's really sort of two things. I think one, from that vantage point as in-house legal counsel, to the extent that a company has a board, a governing board or an advisory board, you're pretty connected to that. So, you're helping the founding team make sure they understand how boards operate and how to get value out of the board. For instance, I was the corporate secretary in all three of those companies. So I was connected to, I was instrumental in the governance to the extent there was governance at those companies, overseeing it. So that's one thing, having the insight that you get from that position, whether or not you're serving on other boards. I was seeing those boards. So that's number one. And then number two, a lot of my interest really had to do with realizing there was this opportunity to gain strategic experience that could really help me make the case internally for my own promotion or, for my own, just advancement within the role that I currently had. So, so a lot of it was aspirational, just wanting to be able to tap into the kinds of beginner board opportunities that I knew I could immediately step into and bring value, and they weren't accessible. And, with the eye on a larger board opportunity down the road, possibly in 5 years or in 10 years, if you're talking about a large publicly traded company, for instance. But, you need to begin the path if you ultimately want to get to that really, high profile goal.
So you set your goals, you watched the surroundings, and you saw these men talking to each other, supporting each other. What was your key takeaway that you believe was essential in many of these men careers as board members?
So what was my key takeaway? The essential for them to access the opportunities?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So thank you. So yes, that was part of it, is that when I wanted to find these opportunities for myself and there was nowhere to go to find them, but yet the men around me in these companies, they were finding them, then it prompted the question, okay, where are they? And what I realized was that it's not the board recruiter typically that has access to any of these smaller private company advisory or even governing board opportunities, but with smaller companies. Those are almost always not within the purview of a board recruiter. So that's not where you're going to find them. And before the fourth floor, there was no one out there aggregating these opportunities or incentivizing companies to post them anywhere. So the only way that you would find them, literally, it was a whisper network. It was a tap on the shoulder from a friend, which frequently how that plays out is that, it's my, my buddy who's in private equity. It's this VC I know. It's this friend of mine that founded a company. And, the bottom line is that most players today, at least in the United States, in venture and private equity and founding companies, they tend to be men. So, and people tend to tap their friends for those opportunities because even at larger companies, opportunities don't go through recruiters and there isn't a marketplace. It's almost always word of mouth. And so it is the network of those individuals that are currently sitting on the board or the network of the individuals who founded the company. And that's why if you're on the outside of those networks, it's very, very difficult to penetrate in, to find that first or that second opportunity that gives you that foundation and that framework that you need to really create a board candidate profile that can work for you to access those larger and larger opportunities.
To go back to our great guest, Kelly Howie, episode 83 on PhD, she actually recommended you, Breen, to invite you to this podcast. Hello, Kelly. This is not just randomly schmoozing. Networking is the art of making sure these connections are worthwhile and they will stick with people you meet for longer than just one occasional meetup. So how can we as women become board members if we never had an experience?
Right. Okay. Love that question. And actually, so one thing, because at the fourth floor, our mission is all about getting women onto for-profit boards as a way to close this gender power wealth funding gap in the country. We are very focused on women. We have a lot of women in our member base, and getting started, especially when we first began, all of the companies that came in on the other side of our marketplace, they were also women-led. So lots of women. And what we discovered is that women, we have many superpowers and we do things differently than men. And Beata, you mentioned empathy at the outset of this discussion. And I want to bring that up because that is something, not saying that men don't have empathy, but plenty of men do. Women, a lot of times, it can be a superpower. The ability to really put yourself in someone else's shoes, to to form relationships that are meaningful and that endure and that evolve over time. And so we play to that strength, and we recognize that everything is a matrix. And so we have something called the relationship matrix, where we really encourage both companies and candidates to approach board and board related relationships that way, along a spectrum. We encourage them not to be not to be shy about reaching out, going outside your comfort zone, putting yourself out there, saying what you are looking for, and then starting slowly. So we have this concept of mentor sponsor, which is essentially a pre-advisory board opportunity where a woman, so say you have no previous board experience, this is something you would like to explore, but you don't really know how to, if you're really qualified yet to put yourself out there as an advisory board candidate or what that looks like. Why not reach out and see if you could begin as a mentor, maybe have that graduate into more of a sponsoring relationship. If given what you do at your day job, you're really in a position to help that, probably earlier stage company, help them say close an important contract or give them really great introductions and connections within a certain community or network. And then have a frank conversation with that founder. Okay, I think I could become a really valuable advisor to you. Why don't we give this a trial period where I'm, essentially a mentor and I'm sponsoring your organization and trying to help you where I can. And let's check in 3 months or in 6 months and see how this feels. And if it feels good, then maybe it makes sense for this to be actually a more official advisor relationship. And if so, let's paper it. Let's enter into an advisor agreement. Let's discuss what's reasonable compensation possibly in the form of equity, and also what's a reasonable services expectation. Like, what can you expect from me as the advisor? And will this vest over a period of time, say 2 years or 4 years? So we provide a lot of that context and the templates and the guides so that people feel empowered to enter into those relationships in a way that feels organic and doesn't feel transactional, swipe left, swipe right. You can get to know, and you should get to know this other person, because these are really important relationships, both for the company and for the individual. And we also see a lot of, we see in the board universe, people get to know each other in all sorts of different ways. It might be as that kind of mentor sponsor. That's how the relationship begins. They might jump in already at the advisor level, but then the company, say, has a funding round and is focusing on its governing board, has a need for an independent director. Where will that company look? It makes a lot of sense that they look to this bench of advisors that now they've cultivated and they have a relationship with, because that governing board seat, that independent director relationship, is next level. And so, it's typically a more serious commitment, longer term, it's higher compensated. There's a fiduciary obligation that the individual has to the company. So everything is higher stakes. So it makes sense that it can graduate and turn into that. So anyway, hopefully I answered that question. I think women are really good at, asking for directions, recognizing, what they don't know, and being willing to start slow and engage organically. And frankly, that's very effective.
That's very effective. You mentioned being intentional in our efforts. So having a plan is definitely very useful. Now, in terms of the fourth floor, I am curious, is it only open for women or is it open to everybody who can join your network?
Yes, thank you for asking. So it is open to all companies. So we really want, our big picture stretch reach goal. We would love all companies out there, not just the Russell 3000 that Beata, at the outset, you quoted a statistic from Equilar and 50-50 women on boards. It's a very important statistic, this 28% of the Russell 3000. But I want to make the point that public companies, of which the Russell 3000 are public companies. And then, of course, there's the S&P 500 companies. And there is a small number of public companies. But there is a very, very, very large number of private companies, and Equilar and 50/50 Women on Boards are citing the statistics that we have. We have statistics for those public companies, this really small subset of companies. We don't have any statistics, or hardly any, for all of those millions of private companies, which, I have to make this point because, frankly, I often feel like this is the headline that everybody is missing. The fact that there is zero transparency and it is a black box and we don't know what those statistics are. And the little bit that we do know strongly suggests those statistics are dramatically worse than 28%. So I think that in and of itself is newsworthy and should be on the front page of the New York Times. And for some reason it's not. The reason why I'm making this point is because that is our ambition. That is our goal. We would like to be a tool for all of those companies, the public companies, sure, but also these millions and millions of private companies where right now there is no tool for them to easily, efficiently, inexpensively think about how to be strategic, build out their advisory boards and their governing boards, bring all this value to their company, also bring some diversity in at the leadership level, and really benefit from that. So we would like to be an alternative to the recruiting industry, but most of these companies are not using the recruiting industry. So it's just we would like to be a tool that then they realize they can tap into to bring value to themselves, and therefore we can drive systemic change when it comes to the demographics of boards for private companies, not just public companies. And that's our stretch goal. It'll probably take a while for us to get there, but that means all companies are welcome. And then on the candidate side, that is limited to women, and it's limited to women who meet our requisite level of experience and criteria, which is 10 years of professional experience, and they've achieved a requisite level of seniority, or there are some caveats to that. For instance, if they're an entrepreneur that has founded a company, they can kind of jump ahead. And then in our backroom investment club, any of those women who are accredited investors could join.
So, because we are not talking about just sentiment, there is a huge amount of money to be made out of taking women seriously, as Cindy Gallup, our previous guest, says. Now, we are talking, since we are talking about millions and some digits and about value, and you cannot separate money from power, can you tell us why you believe there is a huge amount of money to be made out of taking women seriously?
Yes, I love that question too. Thank you. So one thing I want to mention about this is that there was a New York Times article in this last year. I don't know if you read it. The article made the point that although women account for almost a quarter of the top executives in S&P 500 companies, or they did in 2020, they actually only controlled around 1% of the value of the shares that were held among their fellow corporate leaders. So I think that's really, really significant. And that's why it was on the front page of the New York Times. Good job. But in fact, due to the imbalances in stock ownership between male and female C-suite executives, the gender pay gap, which we're frequently talking about, among top executives in these S&P companies, it actually got bigger in 2020. Women were only making 75% to their male counterparts in their companies. And of course, these differences only dramatically increased for women of color. So what the significance of this is that the fact that you simply have a seat at the table. So, maybe now there are more women who are making it to the C-suite. There are more women who are getting that seat in the boardroom. That doesn't necessarily promise equity in the workplace in a few different ways. One, economic equity, like they're not earning the same amount for the value they're providing, but also it is having the seat at the table and having the wealth and the power that dictates corporate culture. That trickle down, that the culture that every company actually has is informed by those few people that have that power to set that culture. And I firmly believe that that's one of the many ways where you can't separate money from power, and why it's so important that women are not only sitting on these boards, and that we get these companies to actually fill their boards, put women in those seats, but then those women need to be earning equity. They need to be getting on cap tables in all these different ways.
Absolutely. Well, it's not only about economic equity. There is so many non-promotable jobs given to women, and I have to bring this story to you, Breen. I sat on a board of directors, and the first meeting I had, I was. Almost like it's a given. I was tasked with making a coffee, and I didn't sit up. I was just like, I take it black, no milk, please, and no sugar, thank you. And that way you can also establish yourself as a thought leader, because there is a statistic that shows as soon as we put our head down to write notes during board meetings, we are not part of the discussion. We are not perceived as participating in the discussion. Another statistics shows that you need at least 3 women on the board to have each other supporting each other, and also to have their voices heard, because so often whatever statement is being made, John is going to repeat that, and it's going to be attributed to John.
Yeah.
Now, we have a couple of lovely comments. Jane, hello, ladies. What will it take to get more women on boards? Jane is asking. Before we go to this question, Natalie Lanto, thank you so much for saying good evening. And Leanne, great to be joining you, Beata and Breen. Joanne W, great to be here. And such a disparity. Yes, indeed. I believe it's your friend. It must be, or somebody from your network, Breen. Joanne W. It's a secret person here on LinkedIn joining us. Anyway, let's go to Jane's question. Hello, ladies. What will it take to get more women on boards?
Okay, so what will it take to get more women on boards? What we believe is that we need to hack the system, and we need to, what I mean by that is we need to get around the chicken and egg obstacle that has traditionally kept women out of the board candidate pipeline. And what I mean by that is that there is this chicken and egg requirement that women, or that anyone, has to have served on a for-profit board in order to be qualified to serve on a for-profit board. So this has kept many, many women and people of color out of the board candidate pipeline. So how do we fix that? We really believe one way to fix that is to reframe how we think about boards as individuals, as candidates, but also the companies. Help the companies reframe how they think about boards. So that's a lot of what I've been talking about all of this black box, these millions and millions of companies that right now aren't doing much with their boards, helping them, incentivizing them to start thinking about their boards differently, start leveraging those boards, creating those board opportunities and making them available is one really important precursor to then be able to hack the system and overcome this chicken and egg barrier, because then we can help women and people who have traditionally not been able to access these opportunities. We can help them get started. So I guess, how do we get more women on boards? We get them on boards. We get them on boards by creating a bunch of accessible opportunities that they qualify for, and helping them reframe themselves as candidates so that they feel confident and they ease into it and they gain the skills to be qualified for those opportunities, match them, and give them that check the box, give them that for-profit board experience so they are qualified and they're in the pipeline. Then it becomes much harder to turn them away. It means that pipeline's more robust, but it's not enough to get women credentialed, get them trained, and get them in the pipeline. We need to simultaneously get the companies to think about their boards differently. We need to get the companies to act and to pull those seats up to the table and, reserve them for women. Yes, but most importantly, pull the seats up to the table.
Well, because the biggest problems are shared problems, the ones that nobody owns, but everybody is affected by.
Yeah.
Speaking about traditional diversity and inclusion programs, they only scratch the surface of what it takes to help women move ahead. For one thing, women need both male and female sponsors. So if you're looking for sponsor, if you're looking for mentor, or if you would like to be a mentee, look both ways. It doesn't need to be a female director, it can be a male director. As long as they support you, they will be they need to know that you want to have that seat on the table. Further, many programs have been too focused on an individual level. Effectiveness requires a holistic, corporate-wide approach, because without a culture change and without the mindset change, life is going to be so much more difficult. Now, there is some data that shows that women have a different approach to risk. Maybe you could bring some counter arguments here, because women are told to be risk averse. Whereas, what's your take on that?
I think that's a really interesting point. It makes me think of a few different things. Okay, number one, I agree that, and of course, there's many studies and statistics out there that show, for instance, women or men are more likely to apply for a job where they only meet something like 30% of the criteria or 50% of the criteria. Women are way more likely to not even apply for a job unless they've done it before or some crazy thing. Like, I think they have to be over 80% or 90%. Don't quote me on any of this, but I think we're all pretty familiar with these kinds of studies that have happened. So on the one hand, women tend to be risk averse, or we let perfect be the enemy of good. We hold ourselves back. We're nervous that, are we qualified? Should we be a director? Should we be an advisor? Should we be sitting at that table? And I think one of the strongest counterpoints, things to remember, is that right now, the world is filled with imperfect men that are sitting around tables everywhere. And it's filled with imperfect men who are putting themselves out there. And not saying that women are perfect and men are imperfect. Women are imperfect too. We just need to feel secure and confident that just because we're imperfect doesn't mean we don't belong at that table. So in that sense, risk averse, that tendency might hold us back, whereas men don't have that same they're not hesitating to throw their hat in the ring or reach out and say, hey, I want that board opportunity. So there's that. But then another thing that makes me think of Beata is all of the incredible studies and statistics out there about how when you do include women in positions of power and authority, decision-making power, that the outcomes are always great economically. So, there have been a range of different studies. I know McKinsey's done a few, on the one hand, just looking at C-suites, looking at corporations. When they have diversity at the top, their profits go up. When they don't, their profits go down. It's pretty black and white. There's been lots of other studies along those lines. Like, I want to say, in the investment world, there's many statistics there as well that are very interesting in terms of funds that are investing in underrepresented founders, for instance, and how much of how much better that can help the returns on a fund when they're investing in women founders. So, that's a little adjacent from this direct question of risk, but I think the bottom line is that there are differences between men and women, and those differences, if we have both sides represented, that balance, it just is proved over and over that makes a bigger pie for all of us to share. Whether it's the bottom line, the economics that a company sees, whether it's better returns on a fund, whether it's a better corporate culture, that's just more inclusive and benefits more people.
Absolutely. Although women's representation in the labor force is steadily increasing from 53% in 1971 to 70% of women working in 2018 in the UK, according to Catalyst, global trends show women still remain underrepresented. As we said, it's not about sentiment, it's about growing the pie. And when we are talking about risk aversion, I would actually like to point out it's a risk conscious decision making. And we cannot put every women into the same pot because we know that more educated women, more conscious decision making is going to be so much better. And actually, I like to quote here Mr. O'Leary, who says, investing in female led businesses brings him more steady results. So much for the risk aversion here. Now, we have a comment from Lian. Fascinating insights, both truly being present and paid with actual power. Indeed, I POV'd in Patrick's opinion. That will be my husband. Great show, ladies. Just a simple point and a way for men to help. When the bros invite you to a board and you, for whatever reason, pass, recommend a woman. Poco a poco. There you go. Question from Patrick. Why the fourth floor? Is the glass ceiling so low? Surely it ought to be 20 plus at least for the skyscrapers of Manhattan. Pun intended.
Okay, wait, and meaning 20 plus years of experience? Is that the question? Why is it 10 plus years of experience?
I think it's the floor of his.
Oh, the floor. Okay, sorry, I get that now. Yes, we talk about that internally. We're like, maybe we should just rebrand and be Skyloft.
Mm,
This is where
yeah,
we're going.
skyscraper.
Right. So yeah, well, there's many reasons why the fourth floor. I think the way I like to describe it most is it's that point in your career and in your life when you finally realize that the emperor is not wearing clothes and you've infiltrated the systems of power. You might not be the CEO, but you have your hand close to a lever and you could pull that lever. And so I think it's having some agency, also really having the clarity to see the landscape for what it is. That it's foundational. You have come to that point, and now you are really prepared to move forward. And I think women, speaking just kind of in general, we're there now. We're on the fourth floor. We've infiltrated the system. We have our hands on the levers of power. We know that the emperor is not wearing clothes. So are we going to collectively pull the switch? And we could, and why not? Because it's good for everyone. If this is not about a power grab, women taking it from men. This is about balance, and balance makes more money for everyone. It's not just money. Balance creates more innovation, creates a better world, more opportunity. Companies are better. I mean, frankly, we need it, because how else are we going to survive climate change and everything else coming down the pike? Like, we need to be strong. And how can we be strong if we're not balanced?
Mm. Women hold up half the sky, but why men still rule the party? It really baffles me. What is the political or the mandate? What is the mandates in the world that is going to help make change happen, if
Yeah.
anything?
Yes. No, that's also a great question. I mean, I think, okay, interesting too, because the United States obviously is just one place, and there is, there's many places in the world. I think the United States oftentimes is behind in this
Mm,
respect. I feel like we certainly are here. So we don't have, there isn't a regulatory framework in the United States. There are not legislative mandates that require transparency for private companies or in the private sector. And, this is why we have the stats from Equilar on the public companies, but we have nothing on the private companies. So that is one huge obstacle in the United States, that we have utter lack of transparency because there are no mandates. Now, people have tried. So, in California, there was some board diversity related legislation, but it was thrown out in the courts ultimately. Now, I think it still was effective in that it spurred change. It helped to create a national conversation. But that's indicative of, I don't know a lot about where we are in this country. And now NASDAQ took a really powerful stance, diversify or delist. This has had also a large impact in the United States. The SEC came out and supported that movement by NASDAQ, which is very positive. That being said, there is a case pending, I believe, right now in the Fifth Circuit. So unclear what will happen there. Now, Goldman Sachs is another example of private sector taking a stance and refusing to, or requiring companies that it's taking public to have diversity when it comes to their board. Goldman Sachs, I'm guessing, is probably not doing this out of the goodness of their heart so much as they're doing this out of, shareholder obligation, right? Or caring about making money for making money sake. Because it's good business to have that diversity at the board level. So I guess you're asking what needs to happen in the United States. We need to have some legislative mandates. I don't know, that requires at least transparency as a place to start. We'll see how that goes. In the rest of the world, I know in the UK, I know in Europe, there's been really significant legislation in this past year that has created diversity mandates and requirements. I think that is powerful, and that will hopefully have a really large impact. And I know other countries, other parts of the world have similar initiatives. So probably having some sort of universal credentialing, is similar to ESG. How there is no universal standard, but there are metrics and people are coalescing. I think a similar thing probably has to happen when it comes to governance. Oh, I can't hear you, Beata.
Hey, here we are. I'm back from muting. Jane W says, very nice insight. Being risk averse is not a bad thing. Look at FTX and Terranos. Well, these are quite an example, especially with Terranos, with having her advisor very male and with her impersonating male dominance. It's quite interesting because I think we can achieve so much more when we are being feminine, and this is when Nancy Reagan comes into my mind, because feminism is the ability to choose what you want to do. I choose to have a career and I enjoyed it while I had it, said Nancy once some time ago. Now we have some comments here. Emperors without clothes, ugly image of middle-aged board member of men there, Breen. Seriously, Skyloft, love it. Getting into the ionosphere, if not orbit, with female boards, indeed. Marianne Madera says, hello, Breen. I agree. Balance makes a better world. Great live stream, ladies. Thank you so much, Marianne. And indeed, as you mentioned, it's all about balance. And it really baffles me why so many companies are using so many men, the same men, and it's all over again. And I actually have seen and heard of some men in Malta, for example, having more than 20 boards positions. How can you make a decision being on so many boards and be independent in a small country of Malta? I wonder, 450,000 people living, how can you really be capable of sitting on boards? Maybe it's just sitting, that's how they perceive it. So Breen, let's go back to our questions, and we talked about the money opportunity, and we talked about the pipeline issue and chicken and egg. And this is actually very interesting because the pipeline issue is transparent also in technology, because we bring so many women to the bottom of the industry to have a career, and then we never show them the ladder. And I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. So maybe we could share the resources here. Here is a link we prepared earlier, ladies and gentlemen, and you could explain what you can offer to all the career-driven women.
Yes, absolutely. And I believe the link that's being shared is a link to sign up for a platform tour, which we do weekly, Mondays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is a really a great way to learn what we are all about, and specifically how we bring value to individuals and to companies if you are a founder of a company, so you can make a determination about whether or not it's right for you. And so for women who are executives or who are in corporate careers and are professional or pursuing those careers, if you serve on an advisory board, there have been studies that have shown that correlates with a significant increase in the salary that you can negotiate for at your job. It also correlates to promotions and being able to credibly make the case that you are strategic and not tactical, which a lot of women, we join the workforce, we're equal, but then there's all of this implicit bias. It becomes much harder for us to be seen as C-level, to get that promotion, to make it to the next step, because the bias is against us. If we haven't done it before, then no one wants to take the chance on us. This does not apply to men. So I think, like, just thinking about your career separate and apart from being a sitting director on a board or anything, being strategic about board relationships can just help you ascend in your own organization, in your own industry, professionally. The other important way to think about it is that you're accruing your own personal portfolio of wealth, because every advisory board, every governing board, every angel investment, everything that you do like that, it results in equity, either sweat equity or equity that you're accruing through an investment that then you have, that you're participating in the innovation ecosystem. And that is also valuable. So, that translates to more freedom. That translates to the ability to take risks that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. So I think those are all ways to think about pursuing a board career, a for-profit board career, and the value that it can bring to you that's separate from that director relationship.
Mm. Now, what's your number one book that you wish you read it before you started your career, Breen?
Okay, well, for this, I think there has to be two answers. So one would be, so Anne Coquette, who is the founder of the Guild. It's an amazing organization, and Anne is extremely smart, and she wrote this book, Dare to Launch, and I just think it's great. I've read a lot of those, kind of startup, Silicon Valley, these kinds of books. I think her book stands out because it's extremely intelligent, very clear, very simple. So if you are an entrepreneur that is just getting started, it's a phenomenal book. And I don't think she'd written it when I came up with the idea, so I couldn't read it before, but I wish I had. And then the other book that I think is great, but this is specific to the fourth floor, which is a market network, is The Cold Start Problem by Andrew Chen. And I really wish I had read that when I was first contemplating, like, how to productize the fourth floor. That would have been very helpful.
Well, it's never too late, because you wake up every day and you make moves to progress your career, and you are intentional and strategic, as you mentioned. So we are heading towards the end of our show. We talked about the book. Can you give us now your favorite life lesson quote, and how did it change you, Breen?
Okay. Yes. So my favorite quote, actually, I came across, this is a recent quote. It is that you always overestimate how much you can accomplish in any single given day. So, I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with the to-do list that has 40 things on it, and you really think you can accomplish it. And then the day ends and you've worked so hard and you've accomplished 4 things on that list. And it can be soul crushing, but you also underestimate how much you can accomplish over a period of time simply by showing up each day and giving it your all. So that was a mind-blowing insight for me on this entrepreneurial journey, because, you know, the day-to-day can be crushing. If you remember, though, that if you stop and you look back, say over the past 3 months, and see how far you've come, it's shocking. Even if you have 3 months worth of days where you show up and you can't finish your to-do list, if you just keep showing up, you're always underestimating how much you can actually accomplish. So I love that quote as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Maya Angelou says, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Now, Breen, thank you very much for all the insightful information about women on boards and how to join your network. I am mindful of the passing of the time, and I wanted to ask you, we are almost at the end of pandemic. I mean, there is still a whiff, but luckily we can travel anywhere in the world, provided we have means, and that's definitely helpful if you're sitting on the board. However, if you could choose any person in the world to have private breakfast anywhere in the world, who would you choose and where would you go to?
I love this question. Okay, so I knew the place immediately. I'm not sure if it still exists, but when I was 22, I lived in Morocco for a year. And there was a place in Rabat, and it was called Chez Paul. And it was literally the best breakfast I've ever had in my entire life. So it would have to be there. And then as for the person, it's always really tricky because there's so many. But I think at this moment, it would be Melinda Gates. Because I really, really think if Melinda Gates, if she knew that if she understood what we were doing at the 4th floor and how we've identified an opportunity to close the gender power gap by getting more women on boards, I think that she would be an incredible partner and she would help us drive systemic change. So if anyone knows Melinda Gates, please help me have breakfast with her.
Well, we definitely will put a word out there in the social media. Thank you very much, Breen. It sounds almost like inventing Anna. We had Terranos, we had FTX. We didn't watch FTX collapse on Netflix yet, but I'm sure something's cooking there. Now, Breen, thank you so much for your insightful information. I really love the idea of having that seat at the table with Melinda. Can you please let us know how can we support other women that want to sit on boards?
Yes. So I think, I loved one of the suggestions from someone who was listening. Recommend a woman that you know. If you hear of any opportunities, I think encourage women that you know to put themselves out there as a candidate, to start to think of themselves that way, to reframe and recognize that even if they're not currently a sitting CEO of a large company, they too very well might deserve to sit on a board. So I think we can be supportive that way. Understand that it's time, that it's okay for us to be imperfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Also, just, whether it's with the 4th floor or not, reach out to entrepreneurial communities and ecosystems. Encourage women to do that, because that is the whisper network. That's the golf course why all those men at those tech companies had access and were sitting on those boards. It's because of that whisper network. It's because of reaching out and putting their desire out there to be an advisor and be a candidate. So I think we all need to be open and understand that you have to go outside your comfort zone. Talk to people you don't usually talk to. If you are a corporate lawyer, you're an executive, you always hang out with other people that are like you in your industry. Well, go join some other network or community, take a risk, go outside your comfort zone, meet the people that are more closely connected to boards, venture capitalists, private equity, entrepreneurs.
Mm, absolutely. And support other women. I mean, it costs you nothing to write, comment, congratulations, or say hello to us in the comment right now in the section. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we are in hot water in life." How are you in hot water, Breen?
That's true. I know that quote. I love Eleanor Roosevelt, and that is a great one. Well, I like to think that it can bring out the best in me. So I hope so. And because the water is hot when you try and take the path less traveled by. That's for sure.
Absolutely. It brings the best, and it is making a decision to wake up in the morning, smell the coffee, and start your day, even if you only had a couple of hours sleep, Breen, because you went to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning today.
Indeed, indeed.
Thank you so much for your very insightful and informative session. And that's it from 93 of the episode PhD Livestream Positivity Hacks delivered by Breen Sullivan. To stay updated and ensure you never miss a positivity hack delivered, follow Woman on It and turn on notifications to be alerted once a video has been released. Women belong in all places where decisions are made. It shouldn't be that women are exception, as Ruth Ginsburg said. As always, our positivity quote comes from positive thinking only and goes, look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. Next week, we are joining at the usual time, Wednesday, 6 p.m. CET, 12 p.m. EST, and I encourage you to support women no matter what they do, whether it's sitting on the board or whether it is just trying to make a career. Thank you very much. Have a great day and positive outcomes.
Thank you.